Good day and welcome to Because Growth Matters. I'm your host, Daniel Robus, and this is the podcast for sales professionals, business leaders, and growth-driven teams. Let's rethink how we lead, coach, and grow in today's fast-changing sales landscape. Today on the podcast, I'm thrilled to be joined by someone who's dedicated her career to elevating the way we think about sales leadership and sales enablement. Bernadette, the founder of the Sales Leadership Academy, where she helps B2B sales leaders scale their influence, increase impact, and commercialize expertise in a world that's changing faster than ever before. Bernadette, you've developed a suite of flagship programs, the Revenue and Role Clarity System, the Coachella experience, all designed to tackle real-world challenges that sales leaders face every day. You've got an immense body of work, but you're also an advocate for bringing story, strategy, and self-leadership together to drive revenue and build teams. It's such a pleasure to have you here, especially since it's impromptu and it's the first time that we're meeting. I'm so excited. Thank you, Bernadette. Thanks for joining us. Where in the world are you?
I am currently in Denver, Colorado, in the United States of America, and I know that you are in another continent.
I'm a long way from there, but on the Southern Hemisphere, where I think you came from originally. How did you end up in the US? Give me a little bit of the background there, Bernadette.
Well, yes. So, like, dreams do come true. My husband and I had, well, it was actually my husband's fault. Like, everything's always my husband's fault. Poor guy. It was actually his idea to say, hey, let's explore the opportunity of going to America. And I loved coming over here. I was part of a community. I still am part of a community in the sales leadership space. And we would come over here every year. And it was just like, well, why don't we explore the opportunity of moving over here and expanding my speaking opportunities? And so we looked at getting a green card, really. And the opportunities for getting a green card were there for me, but not for him to work. And so there was one opportunity available if I was able to prove that I could meet the criteria for what's called the Einstein card, which is the category that the Pulitzer Prize winner and Nobel Peace Prize winner are given. And so I was able to dig in deep and go through the bragg file. And I was able to provide enough evidence that validated for the government to say, yes, you do. And within 12 weeks, we were approved, and both of us came over here. And we're both residents, so we were very, very fortunate.
Why is speaking such a big part of who you are? What drove you to it? What was the big thing that said, there's a stage, I'm on it?
I don't know if it's so much there's a stage. Well, actually, there's something that does happen, and I'm not sure if it's with every speaker, but I know for me, there is something that happens when I am on stage. I don't get scared. I get butterflies beforehand, but I don't get scared. Something happens where another part of me kicks in, and there's a message that kind of comes through. It's in my writing as well. So if I'm given the opportunity where I have a few bullet points, I can speak to those bullet points so long as I get to a point in here where what I'm saying is coming from here and I'm completely oblivious to what's around me, so long as I know I'm speaking to one particular person. It's got to come from here. The minute it starts coming from your head, then it's a different energy altogether. And that's when you're not connecting. But when it's from your heart, it's really from a different energy. And that's where the true you comes out.
Bernadette, I'm going to ask you one more thing. You moved all the way north from the Southern Hemisphere. What is cool about living in Denver?
Well, there's lots of cool things here. I'll tell you what, we never lived in the snow before, so that's pretty cool. As in literally pretty cool. But no, you can't see it through my window here, but the Rocky Mountains are like literally 5 minutes from here. So we're right at the base of the mountains, which is gorgeous. Yesterday, I took a photo just right at our gate here. A buck walked past. Yesterday before dinner, I'm walking on my path and I've got it on video. A coyote was on the path. And last week, my husband and I were on the same path and there was a snake. So that's pretty cool.
I can't wait to go to Colorado. I would love to run in the Rockies. I do ultra trails. I really enjoy the mountains, and I'm wishing you every happiness there. I hope it just goes so, so well. Let's dive into sales. You've worked in many facets of sales, selling, leading, enabling, coaching. What brought you to sales in the beginning? Why did you get into sales?
Well, different facets, you're correct. So my first job was selling fruit in the local fruit and veggie shop. I've also done door-to-door selling in Queensland, selling stationery sets for multiple sclerosis, and that was door-to-door selling at $7 an hour when I first left New Zealand and went to Brisbane on a working holiday at 18. So I've done door-to-door. And when I was at Xerox, I was in a credit admin secretarial sales coordinator role, and I was doing the sales guys' orders and their commissions. And it was this one particular time, there was a sales guy who was not a high performer, was pretty average. I remember looking at the money that he was making at that particular point in time for that month and the caliber of guy he was. And I thought, oh my God, if he can make that, so can I. I applied for the job that month for the trainee role and 3 interviews over a period of about 5 or 6 weeks. And they kept knocking me back, saying I didn't have what it took, that I was too nice and I was not aggressive enough. Well, I think it was about week 6, I marched into the managing director's office and I demonstrated that I did have what it took. And he's kind of pushed his chair back and he said, "You've got the job." So I won't share with you the language I used, but that was my only way of proving it at that particular point in time. So from that point on, I have been in sales and sales related roles. And at the end of the day, it's not about how well you can close. It's not about those kind of skills at all. And you can continue to follow the gurus and you can continue to do all the courses in the world, but it has nothing to do with any of that.
What has it got to do with?
Well, that plays a part, of course, because we all need to know how to do things, because that's learning. I mean, you need to know how to swim to not drown. Once you learn how, you just do, and you just become a swimmer. And so with sales, there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that if you really just realize that it's so much about who you become.
It's transformational.
It's not so much transformational, it's more an energy that you must bring to the table. And that's probably what I've learned over the years, and it's probably taken me many, many years to learn that. If people realize that they really need to step into the person that they want to become, it's a case of we all bring so much baggage to the table with us that we're really living every single day based on who we were in the past and the decisions that we've made in the past, that we bring so much scarcity to the table. And we're going in on our sales calls and we're going in on our sales meetings and we're bringing so much scarcity based lack energy, but we don't realize we're doing it because we've normalized it. We've normalized our beliefs around money. We've normalized our thinking and our beliefs around people in authority. Why do people have such fear around calling the C-level? Why do they have such a propensity to not pick up the phone? Why do they want a discount so readily? Why not sell at top dollar? So we as human beings have normalized all these beliefs because we've been brought up in a system that has made these beliefs so normal. And so how do you break that structure and break the system that we've become a part of? That is the $64 million question. And that is what we have to be able to do in order to lift our standards.
And is that why you've felt it was missing from the traditional sales leadership and the execution of sales leadership? Because you have a bit of a radical view on sales leadership and where it plays a part and what it does. Was that the catalyst for you? I just don't accept these ceilings and there's got to be a way through them. What drove you there?
I've always done sales training, and I've always done sales training based on what everybody does sales training around. The same books, the same structure, the same whatever. And so this time last year, it was a case of, you know what? I'm feeling empty doing this. I don't want to do this. I love coaching because when I'm coaching, I can play by my own rules and I can push buttons. And my clients, when I'm coaching them, I can go places with them and I can really rattle their cages and change happens. And that's fine. But if I'm called in to do sales training, I can't do that in a group situation as much if the sales leader has an outdated view of what their perception of sales training should look like. So if their perception of sales training is A, B, C, and D, and I push back and say, well, I think it could, probably should, maybe should look like this, and they're not that way inclined, then they're not for me. I don't want to work in that kind of energy. But in coaching, it's different. So last year, it was a case of, you know what, this ain't for me. So I thought, no, I'm not going to be doing your typical sales training. Plus other things happened. And I thought, no, you know what? I want to focus on speaking. However, people still want to work with me. And it's like, well, okay, what can I bring to the table? And it's like, salespeople are great. They need leadership that's going to lead them in the right direction. The leaders need to do more work because the sales guys and girls, the salespeople are getting the blame. It's now 50 to 70% of numbers are not being made. And I've read that it's up to 90% in some cases. But the salespeople are the ones that are out on the front line. I've just jumped off a call with the head of a large organization responsible for a number of different states. And it's the salespeople are getting the blame. But this is what the conversation we were having. The sales leaders need to take responsibility because it's not just the pipeline where it's happening. It's actually happening way, 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 way before the pipeline even happens. And so the model that I've put to her is my revenue and role clarity system. And it shows 5 or 6 stages prior. And this is my whole thrust, is that we really need to shift the conversation. And the conversation needs leaders who are prepared to look a little bit deeper and to find sales leaders who give a damn. At the end of the day, it's shifting the energy and it's shifting the paradigm and it's breaking the structure, not just of the baggage individuals carry, but it's breaking the structure of what a really good sales conversation should look like. Because for me to go into a sales organization and say, hey, let me train your salespeople, how on earth have I got the right to do that if I haven't looked at so many factors prior to that? Even just putting an assessment out is not enough.
Do you think our sales force in the field today know how to prospect anymore? Are they being coached into that by their leaders? Do they know the value proposition? Do they know how to create value? And does that sit at the feet of the sales leaders, or is that at the sales enablement team, or is that at the C level? Where did this problem come where we turned into order takers?
Now you've just thrown a whole heap of different roles into that one sentence, that one question. You have thrown a whole heap of different roles. You've thrown the CEO, sales enablement, the salesperson, the sales leader. You've thrown value prop. You've thrown prospecting. Now, in that one question, what is the purpose of each of those people? What is the perception of each of those roles? What is the responsibility of each of those roles? Can you hear what I'm saying? How can you answer that when none of that has been broken apart? And so that one question I'm supposed to be able to answer when I have zero visibility into any of those. Even just in one organization, you've got You've got an SDA, you've got a BDA, you've got an AE, you've got an AM. What else have you got? You've got sales enablement, you've got a sales leader. And every single one of those has come into that organization, been onboarded, they've applied for a job, so they've got the job description, and they've come into that role, and everybody looks through the lens of the job description. Now, every single one of those is totally different, and yet they're all selling.
I'm sure you point out to them that they all should be selling, but quite a few are internally focused, so much justifying where they are every day. And there's this inner complexity where we all weave together. And I love how your practicality breaks it down to say, guy, we're responsible for this, or girl, we're responsible for this. And that's how we move forward. And is there almost a palpable sense of relief when you can show them these avenues that we should be operating in? Or do you get kickback?
Oh, no, definitely not kickback. And it's not relief. It's that everybody is on the same page. So it's not relief, it's clarity. And this is what's missing is clarity. So, when I work with teams, the most important thing is that what comes out of it is that people realize that people are doubling up on jobs, or you've got leaders who are, or not just leaders, but people who are either missing an action, or leaders who are realizing that there's micromanagement happening, and you can start to see why. You've got C-suite who are realizing that they are living in a world of activity instead of responsibility. You're seeing roles that, oh no, I thought I was doing that. No, I'm doing that. So you've got two roles that are actually doing the same thing. So coming back to the whole point that we're talking about this with is that the sales role and the sales leadership role, I push buttons. Sometimes I push buttons because I can see from the side that I'm on that there is so much more than just teaching people how to close deals, to get that pipeline flowing. There is so much more. And it irks me because too many people think that it's just a case of, well, let's follow the latest guru to find out what the top 3 hacks are to getting a deal quickly, instead of actually spending a little bit more time, taking the time, and realizing that you really do have the answers there. If you realize that by looking a little bit deeper, coming from that place of, we do have the answer, we are already there. We simply need to lean into this a little bit more, give ourselves the space, create that container, lean into what we've got, forget about everything else. And by forgetting about everything else, we're going to open up space for something new to come in. And that newness that's going to come in will be business.
If I had to ask you 3 things that a sales manager who's not lucky enough to work with the Sales Leadership Academy can do to improve their performance now, what are the 3 things for an average performing team to get better that you would say, do this now? These 3 things will lockstep your performance for your team.
Number 1 is to get very clear on what your beliefs are as a leader. And I don't say that from the space of just that flippant mindset. I don't say that from, what we usually just hear, oh, it's mindset. Think positive. I don't mean it from that angle. I mean, get very, very clear on what you believe your role is. Because as a leader, you've taken on a responsibility. And you need to get very clear on what your promise to your team is, because that's a responsibility. And with that comes a culture. What is the culture that you want to create? Secondly, if you want to build a high-performing team, you cannot build a high-performing environment from a culture that is built on lack. So if your team and you as a leader are constantly whinging and stating what cannot happen and what cannot be done, and we do not have resources, and this is not happening, and it's the politics, and it's this, you cannot create a high-performing team from a culture of scarcity. And third is you are already, even while we have been talking, you are already that person. You are already stepping into that person, that future you. You have already, while we've been talking, stepped into that future you. So who is that future version of you?
That is not what I thought you were going to say. And I'm so happy with that. It starts with belief, it goes into culture, and then it is who we want to be in the future. I really like that. You've obviously seen loads and loads of customers and you've seen change programs. What's the best way that you get sales professionals to actually use the training and the tools you provide? And I know what you're going to say is you affect their beliefs, but how do we avoid this from being a bonfire? We all sing Kumbaya, we spend some time together, and then nothing changes. What is the magic in the sauce that Sales Leadership Academy gives?
Once again, it depends on the leader, doesn't it? It depends on the leader. It depends on the standards. You can't make anybody do anything. And it depends who you have in your world. It depends who I have in my world. And the people I want in my world are people that have standards. And the standards of the people in my world are reflected in my standards. So I do not want people in my world who make excuses. Because if you have people in your world that make excuses, you know that people who make excuses are going to blame people. They're going to blame the economy. They're going to blame the company. They're going to blame other people. And you cannot hold people accountable if all they're going to do is blame. And so leaders today are holding on to people in their team in the hope that they're going to change, but they're not going to change. So one of two things is going to happen. You are either going to make it hard for yourself as the leader or easy for yourself. What's going to go first? Your ability as the leader to be really strong and kind of stand your ground? Or is it going to be the people in your team that are going to comply? If they're going to continue to make excuses, they'll never comply because they'll never take responsibility. So you move them on. Coming back to your original question about the sales leader, people coming in to work with me, it comes back to standards. You want people around you who are there for the right reason and who are ready and willing to do the work. It's about taking action, doing the work, but it's also about doing the work and taking yourself to a different level and realizing that there is this energy. That is what people buy. People buy our level of conviction in ourself. That's what they buy. They're not buying your product or your service. They're buying your level of conviction in yourself. They're buying your level of certainty. That's what people buy, especially in this era of uncertainty.
You often connect revenue growth to self-leadership, and you speak about the leader role. For some people who are almost afraid of this and stepping forward into it, or what do you advise them when you're coaching them? Is their first steps to building leadership influence in their small circle of touch? How do we take those individual contributors who are considering sales leadership? What would you say is the start of the journey for them in order to get onto this leadership train?
They have to be the leader before they apply to be the leader. They have to become that leader before they put their hand up.
And when you coach sales leaders, is that the thing you say over and over again? Be the person who you want to be. What do you find yourself repeating almost to every coaching discussion for these sales leaders?
I would say that create the space is something I say a lot of. create the space is something, and also break the system, break the pattern, break the structure. I speak on deliberate disruption. That's my topic, deliberate disruption. And that is the thing, breaking the structure, deliberately disrupting. If we're not deliberately disrupting the way we think, feel, and act, then something or someone else will do it to us or for us. But that is all about breaking the structure. That is all about stepping out of the system that we've all been conditioned into.
What's a key metric or signal of success that sales leaders, too many of us, ignore? Or what's a thing that you just say, okay, there's a gem. We're going to exploit that one for the better of the team?
I think connection is a really important one. And so psychological safety today is something we really, really need to hone in on. And so when, I've put a model together, it's part of the Sales Leader of Influence program. It's a mastermind. And so, it's always people before process. And so, yes, I focus in on revenue and role clarity because, yes, that's where leaders want to go first. And I also have, you mentioned before, the coach seller experience, because coaching the deal and the human today, beliefs. How do you coach your salesperson on money beliefs? How do you do that? Like, how do you do that if you haven't been trained? Because normally it's around the deal. So I teach what I know, which is how to coach on beliefs, how to coach on behavior, and how to coach on business outcomes. So yes, they're the two flagship programs, if you like. But inside the actual Sales Leader of Influence Mastermind, there's 3 other levels. So you can come in at any level. The other 3 levels where you're talking about what are the metrics, the other include things like psychological safety, include breaking the deliberate disruption, breaking the structure, include those types of things. And so when you're talking about what other metrics are really important, psychological safety is key. So what I've created is I've taken 2 very well researched and very well respected models, and I've created my own out of those. One of those is David Rock's model SCARF, which you may have heard of, and the other is Anthony Robbins' 6 core needs. I've merged the 2 and I've created my own, which is, the acronym is CARES, CARES, because I want sales leaders today to realize the importance of that acronym, the importance of CARES, and how important it is for leaders, sales leaders, to care about the psychological safety of salespeople, because they are the front line. They're copying it. And the amount of stress, the amount of depression, the amount of salespeople who are going home burned out and losing their jobs when it's not always their fault. And so CARES stands for connection, autonomy, recognition, equity, security, and growth is the through line. So it's CARES plus. When you're talking about metrics, this whole model and framework and experience that I put sales leaders through with this model is the metric. And the metric is a 2-way conversation where the psychological safety is paramount. So really important, and an opportunity once again for the sales leader to deliberately disrupt their pattern of leading.
If you look at a leader that we would all know, who embodies or who captures this type of leadership that we should be aspiring to, bearing in mind we're all unique, we're all going to look our own way, but who's kind of role models for you that you can use as an example for us?
I mean, there is somebody that demonstrated it through COVID. And I mean, even prior to COVID, anybody who's going to listen to me, please remove any form of political bias. Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand, the New Zealand Prime Minister. So it wasn't just COVID, it was 2019. So 2019 was before COVID, but it was the Christchurch earthquake. That was the Muslim community down in Christchurch where the mosque was bombed. Now, she put the jihad, the headgear on, and she really embraced the Muslim community. Now, that was absolutely empathy personified. And that was such a demonstration of leadership that was absolutely emotional, human emotion in operation. And then, of course, the next year was COVID and the whole country locked down, but she wrapped her arms around New Zealand and she was the role model for leaders globally. So you talk about psychological safety. She didn't have my model or she didn't have my spreadsheet, but she cared for her country.
I love that. And we watch that unfolding in front of us so we can relate to it. And I think that loving us enough to care about where you are and to get down with you while still being a leader is such a powerful thing. I've got two more questions for you, Bernadette. You've created so many bodies of intellectual property. You've created stuff that's changing sales leadership, and I really applaud you for that. My three questions for you. First, where do people get hold of you? Where do people get hold of you that want to work with you? How do we contact you?
So, yeah, LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn. BernadetteMcClelland.com is my speaker site. So I am a keynote speaker. So for conferences and sales kickoffs, I love doing that. And Sales Leadership Academy is the academy where I currently have my learning management system. And so my mastermind will be kicking off very, very shortly. And I will be launching, I don't know when this is going live, but I will be launching my podcast very, very soon. And at this stage, it will be called Beyond the Pipeline.
Amazing. I like that. That's really, really good. Then my second last question, what piece of advice would you give to someone stepping into sales enablement for the first time? What can they do to enable the team that really makes a difference for them?
I'm going to throw it back to you. What would you suggest?
So for me, the enablement team has to understand the maturity of where the guys are or the team is and give them what they need. Don't overpower them. If we're a team that's pretty far gone, for me, the simplest thing would be give me something crash proof on a pricing area that I understand my lanes. I understand the product. I understand where I'm going, but pricing I struggle with every now and then. That would really help me. But thank you for asking me that. My last question, Bernadette, my last question for you. What is the one thing, the 1% that makes you better every day, that you've got in your arsenal that people wouldn't think of, that just makes you who you are?
That one question. What's the 1%? What is the 1% thing that I could do? But no, another question in all fairness is what is it that I am grateful for? And what is it that I am grateful for that hasn't happened yet?
So you even speaking into the future that you want to manifest. That is so powerful. Bernadette, thank you for being on Because Growth Matters. Thank you for holding us as enablement transformational people to a higher bar, setting the bar of excellence. I wish you all the best for your new podcast, all the new stuff that's coming out. We're going to be watching it closely. And more importantly, thank you for an impromptu 45 minutes with Dan.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Daniel. I appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Because Growth Matters. If you got value from today's conversation, please take a moment to rate the show 5 stars on your listening platform and share it with someone who might benefit as well. Don't forget to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. Catch you next week.